Okay, good afternoon and welcome to those who have joined us already. We're just going to wait a little bit longer while everyone gets logged in and all registered attendees join us. Should be 1 second. Okay, looks like we've got the majority of people. Well, welcome to Ethical Hackers Wanted and how InfoSec regulations are driving the demand for operational resilience testing. My name's Andy. I am your host for today, and I have two fabulous guests, Faisal. Say hello, Faisal, and Nikolai. I'll kind of hand over to introduce yourself properly in a sec. And what we're going to cover today broadly is what is hacking, regulatory drivers which impact that, and just checking you can see things properly. Yeah. Professionalization and developing your careers. In terms of me, my background is in sales operations and educational programs. I run a training program, the training division for IT governance globally, and we aim to upskill individuals in most areas around GRC and cyber, in particular ethical hacking. With us, like I said, we've got Faisal. Welcome, Faisal. I will stop sharing so we can see you better.
Sure.
There you go. If you want to say hello and introduce yourself.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon to each and every one of you. So yeah, as Andy mentioned, yeah, my name is Faisal Shabir, and I represent EC Council as a senior country manager for the UK and the European markets. I've been with EC Council now for over 3 years, primarily looking after training centers across UK and EU, looking after their growth and development, and ensuring that we have or we kind of look into filling in the cybersecurity skill gap within that industry specifically. So that's where I am right now, but I come from a security background where I used to sell solutions in the past, working for organizations like McAfee and Kaspersky out of the Middle East. So yeah, quite a broad experience within the field and quite passionate about cybersecurity as well. So that's a short little description about it.
Definitely are passionate about it, Faisal. Well, welcome and thank you for giving us your time. Really appreciate it. And we have Nikolai, our information security expert. Nikolai, want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Andy. Hi, everyone. My name is Nikolai, and I work for IT governance. I used to be information security officer, and also I used to work for BSI as an ISO 27001 lead assessor. I'm certified as CSA Star auditor. I'm also ISO 27001 lead auditor and lead implementer, and I have a master's degree in cybersecurity.
It's impressive background.
That will be enough. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, extensive experience in the banking sector as well. So thank you both for joining us. Before we get into things, I'm going to just run a quick poll. We have a couple of polls just to give us some information as we then launch into our conversation. Are you able to see the poll now? You should be able to. So if you could just let us know how much ethical hacking experience do you currently have? And that will give us a guide to maybe how we can tackle some of the conversation. So we've actually got quite a few of you with 10 plus years. around 80% with none, and then in the middle, nobody. So that's an interesting bridge. Okay, good. Let's just one more poll and then we'll get going. How many of you then have had certified training? So if you no formal training yet, you've had ethical hacking, other cyber training. Okay, some good experience on the call. So 21% have had ethical hacking, 50% other cybersecurity, and 30-ish% with no formal training yet. So, you know, we may speak to you about how we can help you. So, just to get you, make you aware, you can pose questions. Do have a look now for the question bar. Do use it, please. This is an open panel kind of discussion, so your questions will potentially drive that. We've just lost Nikolai, so that's fine. All right. So to get us going, Basil, just talk about ethical hacking for us a little bit. What is it? What is ethical hacking?
Right. So to make it very simple, I'm sure you all know that the President of the United States, he has a team which represents a Secret Service, right? Now, generally, the role of the Secret Service, let's say the Secret Service Department of the Office of the President of the United States, looks at, you know, trying to figure out how safe they can have the president and its family from what's happening all around the world, right? That's entirely what their role is. Now, when we talk about ethical hacking, it's exactly the same. So ethical hacking, in fact, means that, you know, these ethical hackers, they use multiple kinds of tools, you know, hacking techniques, so that they can actually find vulnerabilities and they can find all sorts of issues what you find within their network, in fact. So they kind of uncover these vulnerabilities, and at the end, they provide all sorts of remediation measures to kind of identify that these are the vulnerabilities which have been found out, and these are the remediation measures which you need to take in place. Now, when we talk specifically about ethical hacking, it basically involves a lot of continuous assessment, right? So unlike when we talk about pen testers, which is a little bit more advanced, where pen testers, they kind of specify on a certain scope of a vulnerability within an organization, and that is more periodically. But in ethical hacking, it's more of continuous evolvement, continuous assessment, making sure that all the devices are up to date, making sure that the people working within the organizations are aware about the dangers about attacks. So that's in a nutshell, that's exactly what ethical hacking is all about.
Thank you. So in terms of kind of testing for vulnerabilities, Basil, you know, they're essentially, do they keep up with kind of the latest attack kind of stuff? How do they do that? Do they develop that and test for those things? Is that what you're talking about in continual improvement?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, when you talk about ethical hackers, they always, you know, they go through a certain step process when they have to kind of figure out or find out vulnerabilities, right? So when you talk about steps, it goes through gathering information, which again, you would call it reconnaissance. And then, you know, they kind of try to gain access into the network. They try to maintain access into the network. And at the end, they also kind of figure out what these vulnerabilities are. You know, how you can efficiently report this back into the organization. So that's entirely the steps when you talk about, or methods when you talk about ethical hacking. So if it is to do with the latest attacks, these ethical hackers are aware about, you know, the different kind of attacks which are happening. So when we talk about cyber criminals, the cyber criminals, generally they are far more, I would say, intelligent when it comes to the new kind of attacks we see in today's world, right? And ethical hackers have to pace up with them, in fact, right? But then, you know, as you see on screen, you know, these are the 5 different methods. So they kind of follow these 5 techniques, or I would call it more of 5 different tracks, so that then they're able to uncover the vulnerability and then create a report.
Yeah, and who would normally deal with the next steps from that report in terms of
Right.
the business?
Right. So when we talk about a business as such, or I would call it more from a cybersecurity department within an organization, right? So ethical hackers obviously come from a perspective right from the initial stages of finding out vulnerabilities. Once a report has been identified, that is then shared with another team. We call it more of like an incident response kind of a team. So whatever reports have been figured out, it's the job of an incident handler to kind of figure out that, okay, what are the next steps need to be taken when it comes from a business continuity or a disaster recovery perspective. So it's again collectively a role of multiple people within the industry, but I think ethical hackers play a key role in actually finding out what are the let's say effects or what are the negative areas which needs to be looked into when it comes from a vulnerability perspective within an organization, and then that is then carried forward to the rest of the cybersecurity team so that that can be implemented, because then again tomorrow when an attack happens, the organization knows what needs to be done and they're secure from that perspective. I mean, that's from my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked to resilience and response. How about defense against attacks?
Correct. So when I mentioned about incident handling, it more comes from a defense perspective. So you call it, you have the red teaming and the blue teaming, right? So when you talk from an offensive perspective, that is more of a red teaming perspective, and that's where the ethical hackers fall. Then you have the blue teaming area, which is more of from a defensive perspective. There you have these network defenders, you have your incident handlers, you have your SOC analysts as well, because they all fall under more of from a defensive perspective, rather than from an offensive perspective, which the ethical hackers and the pen testers fall under, right? So it is then the role of the team who looks after, or they call it the blue team, or looks after the defensive methods, which comprises of incident handlers, SOC analysts, threat intelligence analysts, where their role is to identify that these attacks do not happen in the near future. And in case if it does, ethical hackers also, they kind of support in sort of simulations as well, which then the defensive team kind of figure out what are the best methods they could adopt in order to defend such kind of attacks in the near future. So as I said, it's kind of a role which everyone have to play together.
Of course. Faisal, if you could do me a favor, just check over your microphone and stuff. We're getting distortion and background and echo.
Is it? Okay.
It was all right just prior to the call. That's all right.
Sure.
When we were chatting just before starting, it was perfect, but the mic seems to be picking up something. So thank you for that, Faisal. In terms of so ethical hackers wanted, isn't it a growing demand globally? Nikolai, any big reasons why that might be, do you think, from your perspective?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, very well.
Yeah, okay. Yes, of course, there's so many different reasons to occur such demand, and we can name a few. Let's say the geopolitical environment at the moment is favorable towards this kind of recruitment because of state-sponsored attacks, and they're not only focused on governments, they're focused on private companies, individuals as well. So we have also increasing complexity of IT systems, and the modern IT systems are becoming very interconnected in terms of networks, cloud deployments, and the growing use of mobile devices. So this complexity creates more attack surfaces for malicious actors, which creates harder to secure, makes it harder to secure the systems. And we have, for instance, regulatory compliance that is also demanding such expertise. We can mention the upcoming DORA, which is focusing on the financial sector. But we also can talk about other, such as NIST or ISO 27001. They're also requesting this type of services in order for companies or entities to be compliant. We also have that demand driven by data breaches and privacy concerns. We have high profile data breaches and privacy scandals that have made consumers and businesses more aware of the importance of data security. So that drives the demand. This has led to increased investment in cybersecurity, including pen testing. There is also shortage of skilled professionals. So despite the growing demand, there is a shortage of ethical hackers, and this is creating a competitive job market for qualified professionals and driving up salaries as well. We can talk about cloud adoption. That's also another driver. The widespread adoption of cloud computing introduces new security challenges, and ethical hackers and pen testers are crucial for assessing the security of cloud-based infrastructure and applications. So this is quite important. Then we have Internet of Things. They're making it essential for organizations to evaluate and secure their devices against potential attacks. We have remote work, and we all know that the devices we're using, they have to be properly secured, and that takes testing as well. We can't just leave things to chance. We have the cross-border cybersecurity challenges that I mentioned earlier, the geopolitical tensions. And we also have technological espionage. We heard a lot about North Korea and China, for instance, how they infiltrate. And there was even a contractor in the UK who was developing a new fighter jet who got penetrated, and China owns all this information that it's worth of billions of dollars, and now they've produced the same fighter jets, and as competitive as we are. So that's how important that is, and how critical the penetration testing industry is to the world.
Yeah, increasing massively. Faisal, would you agree with all of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like to add another point to that as well. Again, this is something which I've recently read, and was going through a certain article, and it says that the extent of OT attacks as well has increased. So when we talk about energy houses, you're talking about critical infrastructure organizations, 24/7 operations running, and somewhere I was reading through certain statistics, and as per 2023, it was mentioned that there has been a rise of 47% when it comes to ransomware attacks, specifically in the OT environment, right? So today, when we talk about our environment, and as Nikolai mentioned, we talk about cloud, we talk about your traditional infrastructure, you're talking about IoT, OT as well is kind of gaining a lot of, I would say, popularity from a cyber criminal perspective, right? So that's again an area of concern quite a lot. Just to give an example of a water treatment plant in US, there was an attack which happened in the year 2021. A similar one happened in US again. This was a meat company, so all the meat supplies were stopped. So imagine when you have meat supplies stopped, that's going to be quite difficult for everyone, isn't it? So these are certain devastating situations we're hearing about. And as Nicola, you mentioned about the geopolitical concerns, when we're talking about war situations going on, as we all hear about, like specifically with the Ukraine and the Russia war, which started off, I think, at the beginning of 2022, I guess, 2022, somewhere there. We heard a lot of energy companies within Ukraine being a victim of an attack as well, right? Again, they all come under an OT environment. So I think when we comprise all of this together, and then I think one of the most important point, what you mentioned, Nicola, as well, is the shortage of cybersecurity professions, and that gap has been increasing since last year. The number I have gone through is around 3.5 million security professions, which is still required globally, right? And that number could be somewhere maybe a little bit low, because we see that there are professionals joining the industry, but then that's a gap which needs to be filled. Today, a lot of organizations, they invest in cybersecurity infrastructure, but then also it is important to have skilled professionals working in those organizations who know how to configure these security infrastructure in place so that the organizations are safe, from a cyber attack perspective.
And somebody has to point where the problems are, because that's what the ethical hackers are doing, pen testers. They basically point the issues because that's how they're being found. Otherwise, you wouldn't know if something is misconfigured, for instance, or there was a negligence somewhere that it's presenting a threat. And yeah, I mean, we all know about BA that had it recently, right? So I don't know if anyone has traveled with BA, their data is on the black market, and it's not just them. And that is a problem. And BA got fined, quite a hefty fine. Now I don't remember how many, 52 million. I don't remember.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And that's where the organizations are trying to avoid this reputational damage, because that's a very important asset that they need to protect. Besides the monetary issues that occur with refunds when it comes to remediating a problem, or perhaps paying a fine because of a regulator that is imposing this punishment. And we can see in quite few industries how how important that is. Besides the transport industry, we can see it in the financial institutions industry, like banks, insurance companies, which are prime target for cyber attacks due to the sensitive data they hold. And we can talk about healthcare organization, very similar. They have very sensitive patients' data, and it makes them attractive target for cyber attacks. They need partners to help them secure their systems and comply with, let's say, the HIPAA regulations. Where financial institutions will now need to comply with DORA regulation, they still need this type of service. They can't just wave a magic wand and then get all done. Now they need to use this kind of services. Same for government agencies. They have specific requirements for compliance imposed by the government itself. So they need to protect the critical infrastructure and sensitive data. It's not just a matter of civil services, but also of national security. So it's critical. We're talking about retail and e-commerce companies as well, and they store wealth of data. We can talk about the notorious, famous Target, the American retailer Target's breach that exposed so many customers of theirs, including their credit card information. And again, if we had a pen testing, vulnerability management, perhaps vulnerability testing as well, ethical hacking involvement that could have been detected, and Target would have been quite fine. Now they suffered heavy losses. Also, technological companies, in technology is constantly developing. So new products and services need to be evaluated and secured. The vulnerabilities that they might expose.
Such as Nikolai, what do you mean by that? What kinds of products and services?
We can talk about cloud services, or we can talk like software or hardware services, or hardware products. Let's say if we're selling a teddy bear that has a Bluetooth connection, and your child is playing with that teddy bear, and the teddy bear has a microphone and a camera, and it's meant to connect to the parent's phone. So we can maybe nurture the teddy bear, we can feed it when it cries, so we can maybe put some money for buying milk for the teddy bear, or whatever that's the activities you need to do to entertain the child through that toy. It has to be secured, but we've seen in the past where this hasn't taken place, and it's been detrimental.
Yeah,
especially when it comes to children. So
it's quite a scary example, that I have to say.
Yeah, you can hack a little teddy bear, and then things are not pretty. We don't want to go in detail.
I think we should do ethical hacking training for parents, maybe. But just coming back a step a little bit, and we're using some terminology here, and so attack surfaces. Could one of you expand on what attack surfaces means?
Either of you. Should I go? You go.
Yeah.
Okay, so attack surface is anything that an external party such as a hacker can get access to. Usually, when we're talking about external attacks, it's interfaces that are internet facing. But you can have internal also interfaces that could be attacked from, let's say, internal perimeter. Doesn't have to be necessarily employee, but it could be someone who penetrated that perimeter. Let's say they're doing a social engineering, they're carrying a pizza box and pretending that they're delivering something very tasty and delicious to someone within the organization. And maybe they plugged in a little USB somewhere on the way while they were walking within the production floor on some of the computers, and that's all it takes, just to plug in something somewhere. And if that USB it's enabled to read, it's not disabled on the computer itself, then we have a problem. Or we can just drop a USB drive on the parking, and then that's how Stuxnet got
so it's essentially
introduced to the Iranian, to the Iranians. So it depends on the whether you're looking internally or externally, but that's pretty much it. You have areas that you can penetrate, and you can have exposure. You can expose the organization to external threats.
Right.
So it's
go on. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I just would like to add there as well, and just adding on to the point what Nicola mentioned specifically about social engineering as well, because I think about 85% and above today when we talk about attacks, that is primarily from a human element, right? So as you mentioned rightly with the USB, sometimes that also happens that when an attacker or a cyber criminal sends a malicious link via an email, or probably spoofs a certain email and then sends it across to a user, and the user intends to click them as well, right? And then whole sort of malware just gets into your networks, and then that kind of again opens up quite a lot of, I would say, more of like a can of worms as well. So again, social engineering attack is quite an enormous thing which we talk about today. And again, as ethical hackers, it's their role to kind of have these periodical, let's say, phishing awareness, phishing simulations within organizations, so that it is just not the responsibility, or it is just not the duty of a person who's working in an IT department, or of a person who's working in a cybersecurity department within an organization. You're talking about every individual in an organization, be it from the marketing department, be it human resource, be it logistics, be it administration, right? So every person needs to share a certain set of responsibility when it comes to security within an organization, right? So that is where again an ethical hacker's role comes, where he then creates this kind of a security awareness training or periodical session where they kind of run through what are the things to avoid, what are the kind of emails they need to check on in case if they really need to read an email, what are the kind of links you need to see, whether you need to read the email carefully, if there is a spelling here and there, because sometimes we're so busy in our own world, and then we kind of tend to spell that miss that one A or a one B within a spelling, and then that kind of leads to devastation.
Could be Cyrillic A. You wouldn't recognize Cyrillic A from Latin A, but they're different, and it would look the same.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that recently.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just ask? Can I just ask one more question, Nicola? I don't mean to stop the flow, but
that's fine.
I just want to move us through the. We've talked about their just attack services, and I think it's also important to maybe step back a little bit and talk about. And I hope I get my terminology right, because I'm not technically brilliant like you guys. Attack vectors, and I can understand why people who fish to rob people of money and hold people to ransom and things like that, I kind of understand that because it's money. Why do governments create such astonishing kind of attacks? Why do they do that? What's their end goal? Are we not allowed to answer that on a recorded thing?
Well, I can talk about North Korea, for instance, because they're under sanctions and they're not part of the global financial system. they need to create some sort of revenue for the government. So they do all these ransomware attacks to extort cryptocurrency from
Right.
the Western businesses and organizations. And it's very lucrative business for the North Korean government. They're very successful at it. They know exactly what they're doing.
And they literally targeting businesses around the world, individuals around the world.
Yes, both.
Yeah.
I think they're very well supported. I can't tell for sure. It's just my opinion, but they're very well supported by Russian hackers. They're well trained from Russian schooling, so they're very skilled and very dangerous, and they do a very good job. They've acquired so much money for the North Korean government, so now they can run the weapon programs, and now they just came up with a hypersonic missile the other day. They managed to create that technology as well. I think again, probably with the help of the Russians, but
Scaring me a
they
bit,
needed the funding.
Nikolai. Scary teddies and scary missiles.
So that's how
So listen,
important this function is to the world.
yeah, it's
It's
so
not
important.
just to an individual organization. It is something to be proud of if one is practicing ethical hacking.
Yeah. Terry, just so
I
you
think
know,
that
I
also
see you.
terms
I
as
see your
a
questions.
state-led cyber attack.
Sorry, Fizz. I'm just Terry. I see your questions, and we will get to them. Don't worry. I'm just waiting for the right time. Sorry, Faisal, I interrupted you.
No problem.
Sorry, were you going to say continue from Nikolai there?
No, I was saying what Nikolai mentioned. I think that kind of relates to state-led cyber attacks, right? I think that's kind of the term which they use, where they have these APT attacks and stuff happening around. And I think North Korea. The example what you've given is quite a easy to understand example. Yeah, it's just that point. That's it.
And then they do these things, and it impacts everyone, right? So sometimes they don't have a way of targeting. It's not like a laser-guided missile.
Yes.
Now, I just wanted to summarize before we moved on as best as I can from what we just talked about. Essentially, what we're saying is due to increasing number of cyber attacks, increasing compliance regulations, technology such as IoT, cloud, the rapid digitalization of developing countries, and generally more digital and remote working, seeing a huge growth in market opportunities. We've talked about the massive growing need for ethical hackers, and as a result, great career prospects and attached to that salary, earning capability. Let's just
and progression within the cybersecurity community. You can progress a lot.
Yeah, and earn even more money.
Yes, that's right.
So just in terms of regulatory framework, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit more closely. Which regulations, for example, in particular, demand compliance, Nikolai? It's required rather than it's a think about it, it's a recommended.
Yeah, well, we can look at the big fat arrow underneath saying shifting from recommended to required. And that tells us where the world is going. Because in the past, those kind of things were, and they were almost like a luxury that weren't a requirement. You can do it only if you want to, or if you feel like. But now it's becoming a requirement demanded by governments and regulators. For instance, DORA, it's the last one to the right. It's legislation coming from the European Union, and it demands to have this kind of testing. You can't, and DORA, it's part of the financial sector regulation. Before it, you have NIS2, which encompasses almost all major industries within the European Union, and that also insists this kind of activities. PSI DSS, it's demanding it as well. SOC, they do have it, but yeah, I mean, with all of them, you need to do something about the testing. with all of them. Even ISO 27001 has the controls there. GDPR is asking us to be vigilant too. PSI DSS, it's part of the certification to be pen tested. Pretty much everything that we look at here, it's something that it will drive the demand for penetration testing and for ethical hacking. And that's not going to stop. I think it will. This demand will increase when now governments and private entities and regulators realize how important it is to understand one's information security posture, cybersecurity posture, whether that will be any organization, whether that will be government or private entity. And that's going to be part of the compliance and certification processes. So that regular demand for services as such will not cease. It will continue, it will expand. So there will be plenty of opportunities to practice and progress within this industry.
Yeah, rightly said, Nikolai. I mean, just adding on to that as well. Now, when we talk about DORA, this is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, right? That's again something which, as part of the EU, they're planning to implement that by January 2025. I mean, that's the date which has been set, which means that all organizations have to ensure that they would be compliant by that time period. And in case if financial institutions and banks are not, then there's going to be fines imposed as well. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a growing concern as well within these banks. And again, we've heard recently, just last year, attacks in specifically when we talk about Europe. Deutsche Bank is one of them. ING Bank is one of them. Again, this is information which is publicly available. They have been victims of a data breach last year as well, which means that today it is extremely important for financial institutions, for banks, to ensure that they go through the entire robust mechanism of having those resilience testing done, having those pen testing done, if not even periodical, but having this continuous assessment methodology on, because once the DORA is set, then I think they have to ensure that that happens on a regular basis, right? So yeah, obviously these kind of regulations are definitely driving demand for ethical hackers and pen testers.
Yes, especially within the economical drivers, but also geopolitical. Now the conflict with Russia, it's affecting the European Union's decisions on cybersecurity because they've experienced a lot of troubles lately, and they can't tolerate it anymore. So they need to drive this legislation, and there is a deadline, as you mentioned. So by that deadline, if someone is not compliant and it gets caught, they will be in a lot of trouble. And so everyone was given, I don't know how many, 3 years to comply with DORA, to implement it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think that falls under the usual regulatory fine framework. So it's not like they have to establish ways of fining. It's already under the current established bodies to take action against those who are non-compliant. I do have a question or two here from one from Terry, one from Fabian, which I think would be worth asking you chaps, and then I've got one more before we move on, if that's okay. Sorry to make you wait, Terry. Got a question on selling pen tests re DORA compliance to third parties. So I'm assuming, can we sell pen tests to ICT providers, for example?
Yes, and I think that I was discussing with a colleague of mine from IT governance yesterday that the main driver for pen testing in terms of the third-party system providers would be the fact that they will need that service, and they're not going to have the expertise. And the problem is where you have financial entities that would want to come in and audit them or review the information security posture, and that will take a lot of their resource because they have to be responsible for the costs as well. So there will be or it could be created, for instance, a service where it will be a third-party sort of trusted service that will guarantee or testify for the compliance of this ICT provider, instead of going to do an audit like the ISO. It's a middleman, the ISO 27001. So it tells a certified organization with ISO 27001 will tell the world, I'm certified, and that is because I comply with this requirement, with the following requirements from ISO 27001. So other entities will not come and audit them since they're already compliant. So it will be something similar, where this kind of service would be critical to third-party providers for financial entities, because otherwise it will take too much resource.
Yeah. So short answer is yes. Sell pen testing to them.
Yes, they will love it. They will look for it.
Just echoes the point around getting trained up on ethical hacking, the opportunities to get work, especially as a consultant out there. I'm going to need us to move through some bits to stay on time. A question from Fabian: from a business point of view, how often would you recommend a business partakes in ethical hacking practices or pen tests?
I'm sorry, from business point of view, how often?
How often is kind of recommended? Is it an annual practice, biannual?
Oh, okay. Well, it depends. From my experience, it depends on the industry you are in and the type of data you're trying to protect and who you're protecting. For instance, if it's highly sensitive and you work for a government that it's requesting you by contract to do pen testing every 6 months, you have to do that. But let's say you're an organization that's compliant with ISO 27001, not just compliant but certified, you can do it on an annual basis or every 2 years. It depends on the risk appetite that the organization has, and also on the stakeholders whose requirements you're trying to satisfy. Would that be a legislation, government body, a customer? So you need to identify the stakeholders and their requirements, and then identify the risk appetite, and that will determine the frequency of the pen testing.
Yeah. And you would test until the risk scoring is below
yes
the appetite.
Because exactly, you test once, you find issues, you mitigate those issues, and you test again to see if everything is back to normal. It's what you're expecting as risk appetite. If that doesn't cover, then you have to test again, and then patch or mitigate or fix or transfer, whichever you need to do. As well.
Yeah, trained. I said train your workforce. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have you got anything to add to that, Faisal? Or
no, I think that's pretty much clear. I think here probably it's a role of an ethical hacker and a pen tester working together. When we talk about that, right? So when we talk specifically about pen testing, I think this is something which I clarified a little bit earlier in the session today, right? You talk about specific vulnerabilities within an organization. So when you do these kinds of periodical testings, then they kind of so pen testers kind of look into specific vulnerabilities, and then they work on those vulnerabilities and then figure out remediation. But when it comes to ethical hackers, they work on a continuous assessment mechanism for all these vulnerabilities and so it's kind of both of them working hand in hand together. But then I think the need of having periodical assessments have been growing now quite a lot, especially with the regulations and the compliance in place compared to what it used to be, I don't know, a few years back. I think today a lot of organizations, it's become quite mandatory for them, especially because of the number of attacks happening. Probably they need to do a few more patch management and stuff going on. But then yes, it's becoming very mandatory now to have these periodical assessments done. I would say instead of 6 months, you should do it every quarter, every 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's there's always a development in terms of cyber attacks happening. So it should be every quarter if the organization needs are.
Well, if we're talking about vulnerability testing, yes. But if we're talking about pen testing or ethical hacking, it could be a different story. Because vulnerability, it's more of an internal job where you're scanning the system and then you identify whether something it's out of date or the protocol is weak or misconfigured or something is behind the firewall that it shouldn't be or in front. So then you identify those, and there are patches that coming on regular basis from the vendors that you operate the you have hardware and software. So that's the vulnerability, right? Which could be utilized by this certification, the certified ethical hacker. So that's another job role. As when we're talking about ethical hacking, it's slightly different. It's basically trying to penetrate, knocking on all the doors, where the vulnerability is scanning. It's a bit different. Yeah.
I'm going to have to move us on, I'm afraid, but thank you for that. Terry, one of your other questions segues us into the next topic nicely. So mainly one for you, Faisal. Comparisons of techniques such as OSCP or CPENT or Pentest Plus. Now, I think I've put up on the screen some ethical hacking pen testing qualifications from EC Council. Can you talk to that, please, for me, in terms of the different techniques?
Right, okay. So do you want me to answer the first part of it, which is the differentiation between OSCP,
Yep.
CPENT, and Pentest Plus, right? Okay. So generally, when you talk about it, obviously all these three certifications, right, they are quite popular when it comes from pen testing. And again, these programs are far more advanced when it comes to penetration testing in comparison to ethical hacking. Ethical hacking is, I mean, personally, from my opinion, it's more of like a junior pen test kind of a role. But when it comes to a differentiation between OSCP, CPENT, and Pentest Plus, they come from an advanced perspective, which means they are more of an advanced pen testing role. But personally, I would, if I would talk from an EC Council perspective, in comparison to, let's say, OSCP and Pentest Plus, though they are very good certifications as well, but I think CPENT has a bit of an advantage there, is because CPENT is the only pen testing course which has OT and IoT pen testing techniques as well, which OSCP might be touching onto it. Pentest Plus doesn't. So CPENT has IoT, and they were the first. It was the first certification, in fact, to introduce IoT and OT hacking, IoT and OT pen testing together as part of the program. And then even when it comes to, let's say, from an examination perspective, I'm not too sure about how OSCP and Pentest Plus examination works, but when it comes to CPENT, it's a 24-hour exam. Now, it's not scary. Don't take that wrong. That you got to sit for an entire day without having any food or without having any sleep. It doesn't work that way. So 24-hour. What I mean by that is that your first 12 hours, you have certain challenges to attempt on. You're given 12 hours to attempt that exam, and then so that you call it as phase 1. And then you have phase 2, which has another 12 set of questions in it. Again, it's about 12 hours, and then you have the reporting, which is part of phase 3. So that's why they call it a 24 hours exam. Yeah. So the reason why it is very extensive is because obviously the idea of pen testers is to make a pen tester as as a specialist as possible compared to any other profession within the cybersecurity industry. So that's just answering the question, and then if you want me to answer what is there on the screen, and if anyone, obviously, if the audience can see that. So that's when you talk about our track, that's the entire EC Council track. So you obviously start from EHE, which is the Ethical Hacking Essential. So let's say that there is anyone who has no experience in ethical hacking. Let's say they are at an entry level, or they are career changers, right? So they always start with the EHE, which is Ethical Hacking Essentials. And the beauty behind this is that this is a completely free of cost course, provided by EC Council, provided by IT Governance. So we work with IT Governance. We've been working with IT Governance now for over 6 years now. And again, when we select our partners, we select very credible partners. So IT Governance is today one of our most credible partners. I think we've been working with with IT governance for quite a long while in some good projects around. So again, when it comes to these certifications, EHE is a completely free of cost course. It's only when you need to attempt an exam, you pay a very small fees to get your certification. But then EHE is extremely entry level. If you have no clue about what ethical hacking means, that's where you get into, right? And then you move on to CEH, which is the prime program, Certified Ethical Hacker. Today, Certified Ethical Hacker is known to be one of the top 8 cybersecurity certifications around the world. And again, you can go and check the Forbes website. So that says that it is a top 8, so it is quite a known program. So along with the Certified Ethical Hacker program, you also have the CEH Master. So CEH Master means that the program consists of your theoretical and your practical exam. So any candidate completes the theoretical and the practical exam, then becomes a CEH Master, right? And then you move on to the next phase, which is the CPENT. So CPENT comes after the CEH program. So CPENT is Certified Penetration Testing Professional. So that overall, we call it the Vulnerability Assessment and Penetration Track. Now, sometimes, we get these questions that, okay, what next after CH or what next after CPENT, right? So if you look at the program down below, which is called CHFI, Certified Hacking and Forensic Investigation, that's a specialization kind of a program. So for those professionals who are working in law enforcement, who are interested in digital forensics, so that is where the CHFI program comes. And then last but not the least, the Certified Chief Information Security Officer program, which is the CISO program. Again, the only program in the world today which speaks about strategy, decision making in comparison to a lot of others. I mean, again, I'm not, I don't want to say anything wrong about CISSP and CISA because they are great programs, right? But then when it comes to CISO, it is not technical at all. It is only strategy, it is decision making, it is vendor management. So a lot of other programs involved. Ideally, it is a program where as a CISO, it's important for you to understand how you manage a team of incident handlers, how you manage a team of pen testers. That's exactly what you learn in the CISO program. So that's overall, in a nutshell, again, a few of the programs, few of the interesting programs, which is quite important, especially for the audience in this session.
Thank you for that. So just a few points from me on this. We had a good number of you indicate earlier on you had no qualifications and limited to no experience. The essential hacking, the hacking essentials, the first step. We will send out some materials post this webinar, and if you get in touch with the email address that we will give you, we'll be able to give you access to that free of charge. And in terms of those of you who are thinking about taking the ethical hacking course, I'll talk about that in a second. I've got some offers at the end, so do wait on. And we had some of you with 10 years plus experience in all of the qualifications, so maybe CISO, CISP, and CISM are the next steps for you. So that was really useful, Faisal, because obviously it's quite a lot of learning, quite a lot of education needed, work experience, and whatnot is involved. Okay, I'm just going to move us towards concluding. We have a few minutes left. Do we have any other questions from participants who are still with us? We seem to have increased participants as this has gone on. It's the opposite to what normally happens. So you've clearly done very well, chaps. Do we have any more questions? If you do, type it into the chat. As I'm waiting for those to come through, I will show you what will become available to you. Thank you, Shabir. That's one question. I'll come to that in a second. So you'll get follow-up materials from the webinar and the recording. As a thank you for attending the webinar, from me to you, we've got 15% off if you purchase a CH course before the end of March. So you can take that as an instructor-led course, as a self-paced product, or unique to IT governance, the blended combination of instructor-led and digital training in the middle. We'll send that out to you. If you've got any questions, you'll be able to hit the link on that orange button, and you'll get, well, you can see the code there, CH15. If you're using your email to book, just put that in at checkout. Now, moving back to the questions. Shabir, thank you. How to get a job as a freelance pen tester? How would we get a job as a freelance pen tester? I guess the first port of call is to get trained up to be a pen tester, isn't it?
Absolutely.
How do,
Obviously.
well, I guess it typically should be, that might be to network, to ensure your LinkedIn profile is clear.
Mhm.
But I think the qualifications are the basis before you even start.
Yes, and then you have to learn a bit of a marketing skills, I guess. But you can contract with agencies or with consultancies where
Point.
when they have influx and they don't have enough people, they can contract you. And that
I'd
probably
say it's a lot
will.
easier to freelance. Sorry, it's a lot easier to freelance once you're an experienced pen tester.
Yeah, definitely. Because you build a name
Yeah.
and reputation.
Yeah.
And then you
Okay,
can
look,
engage other people around you because you might need other people when you grow.
build up a network. Yeah. Maybe connect with all the banking sector as well.
I think
finding
it's a prime importance right now, isn't it? To contact all the banking sector for the time being.
Yeah. So listen, I'm going to wrap up. So first of all, thank you, Nikolai and Faisal. Thank you ever so much for giving us your time, your wealth of experience, and for scaring us a little bit. So for everyone else who's scared of their teddies now with the little cameras, go check them, switch them off, or protect them. Thank you all for your attention for today, and I wish you a lovely evening. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Talking to all of you. Bye-bye.